Hello, everyone. Is it me? Do I start it? Right. There we go. I had some fun putting the slides together, as you'll see. So, this is our third week in our series of looking at the wisdom literature. And today I have the task of diving into the actual books. We've had a brilliant overview from Andy and Paul in the last few weeks, and I'm going to be looking at the first 4 chapters of Proverbs, because the first 4 chapters of Proverbs are there to convince us why reading the rest of Proverbs is a good idea. And as Paul mentioned last week, in modern life, we are bombarded with countless ways to live, aren't we? There's so many different definitions of success. There are gurus and experts out there. There's the latest book or podcast. We're told what to eat. We're told what to wear. We're told how to organize our time, who to follow, and even how to breathe these days. So how do we navigate all the options that are offering a life well lived? Proverbs says, seek wisdom. And wisdom is being skilled at life. Life is about making wise choices. If we see Proverbs as a manual of instructions for life, we can understand that the maker or designer of our life provides the best instructions for use. And we'll discover that it's in our relationship with our maker and his ways that we're going to learn how to live and how to be skilled at life. And more than skilled, as Paul's talk reminded us last week, it's through the grace of God that wisdom brings fullness of life. Eugene Peterson's quote from the Message about Proverbs says this: "In our scriptures, heaven is not the primary concern to which earth is a tag-along afterthought. It is equally concerned with living on this earth, living well, living in robust sanity. On earth as it is in heaven is Jesus' prayer. And wisdom is the biblical term for this living on earth as it is in heaven." So the first 4 chapters of Proverbs set out all the numerous ways that seeking value has wisdom. Seeking wisdom has value. And it seems that we need some convincing. The writer of Proverbs spends a long time saying, look, you've got to get this, guys, okay? And we're going to go through them chapter by chapter, not in detail, but the overviews of each chapter as to what they're saying and why wisdom is so crucial. So to start with, we are exhorted to listen to wisdom. What is the purpose of wisdom? To gain instruction, discipline, insight, acquiring prudent behavior, doing what is right, just and fair, to gain knowledge and discretion, to get guidance and understanding. So right from the start, this book tells us that a life lived well is a life that values wisdom. Other people in the world might tell you that there are other ways to live well. The Bible tells us that seeking wisdom is the way to live well. And it's a positive cycle of seeking how to live well by studying how to live well and practicing how to live well. The prerequisite for wisdom is that it's not just a set of rules, but a response to God and his ways. Wisdom starts from the fear of the Lord, which to our ears in modern life, it means respect, honor, desire to please him. And being skilled at living life does benefit us, but it is rooted in our understanding that stewarding our precious lives well in making wise choices is a way of loving God and serving others and honoring his purposes. Imagine being given a gift that is exquisitely wrapped, and you don't open it because you just want to look at the wrapping. it's not used for the purpose for which it was given, and that is similar to if we don't seek wisdom in our lives are not used for the purpose for which we were made, which was to be in relationship with God and to live well. Wisdom offers us protection, which is perhaps a surprising aspect of it. Wisdom is not just the abstract thinking and clever working out of solving problems, but it is very much to do with practical living. And so wisdom offers us the protection to keep us away from the consequences of our poor choices. A friend of mine has recently just lost her twin sister at the age of 50. The sister took a series of choices and it led to heroin addiction. She leaves 2 children, and what is particularly sobering about some bad choices is that even if we get to the point of repentance and realizing that we want to make a difference, sometimes it's too late. And if we want to make better choices and we want to commit to turning our lives around, we can still suffer from the consequences of earlier poor choices. So chapter 1 ends with a warning of making wisdom a priority, partly because of the example I just gave you, that we have to start thinking, I've got to chase wisdom, I really need wisdom. My family needs wisdom. Those around me need wisdom. Not as a last resort, but as making it a priority. Foolish decisions and living life away from God's wisdom can mean calamity, can overtake us. My friend's sister, she died as a believer. Her family trusted in God for her salvation, and yet it was her destructive choices that led to the type and timing of her death. And Proverbs warns that distress and trouble will overtake those who don't live wisely or choose to fear the Lord. It's very sobering reading. It's not only active rebellion, but it's complacency that can also destroy our lives. The warning being that people not only fight their way to destruction, but we can also slip mindlessly into it. And Proverbs says that they will eat the fruit of their ways, which is a sharp contrast to our family gathering themes at the moment, the fruit of the Spirit, which is where we eat the fruit of God's ways. Next, Proverbs 2, we look for wisdom. It doesn't just come to you once you believe. We are active participants in the search for wisdom. And I think it was 3 weeks ago that Andy started off this series, and he reminded us that Jesus, who was full of wisdom, still needed to search for it. He did so in the temple with others. He did so in the scriptures. He did so in prayer with his Father. So even when we are fully in God, we must search for wisdom too. It's a bit like hardware and software. So we are created to be in relationship with God, and yet many of us are not. We have the hardware, and on the outside we look the same, but what software are you running? Is it the spirit of wisdom, or is it the spirit of the age? And this search for wisdom will determine our experience of life and whether we're skilled at it. In Proverbs 2, the description of the search for wisdom is energetic and essential. It's not just an added on for those who are particularly interested in it. We are persuaded to call out for insight. We are persuaded to cry aloud for understanding. Look for it as silver, says Proverbs. Search for it as hidden treasure. It's so valuable, wisdom. We need to be desperate for it. We need to be passionate for it and energetic. We have to have wisdom and we can't live without it, is the message of Proverbs 2. And where do we go searching for it? The Lord gives wisdom. He is the source. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding, it says. Now, the world at the moment is very, very keen, and rightly so, on personal development. It's a good thing. I'm not against it. I'm a coach myself, and I'm all for personal development. But long years lived and personal development is not the same as having a personal relationship with God and having his wisdom. You know the phrase we're all familiar with, someone who has wisdom beyond their years. So how can this happen if it is only an accumulation of our years that brings wisdom? Wisdom must be from another source than simply life and experience. The converse is true. We also see foolishness in midlife and old age when years lived do not add up to wisdom automatically gained. Wisdom protects us. Wisdom brings safety. This theme is continued in chapter 2. And wise choices keep us safe, as I said. And I spoke a few weeks ago about my 15-year-old son and how proud I have been of his recent choices. And as a result of him putting wisdom into practice, he's reaping the benefits. He's preparing for exams, he's getting enough sleep, he's keeping himself fit, cooking eggs for breakfast himself, and putting his games console in the cupboard, which is my favourite thing. And he's making wise choices, and he's happier in himself. His grades are going up, and he's more energised and engaged. And he's delightful to be around. And so the safety that wisdom offers, the safety in terms of him feeling good about his choices, and leads away from poor choices of stress and lack of sleep when he's preparing for his exams or watching things that he shouldn't. He is feeling happier and more content in himself. So the safety that wisdom offers is that it leads us away from poor choices, and God guards us and shields us and protects us through our own discretion, through our understanding and positive choices, keeping us away from danger. So wisdom not only benefits us, but those who we encounter benefit too. That's chapter 2. Chapter 3 says, lean on wisdom. So what does it mean to lean? Put your weight on it. Wisdom acts as a support. We can't manage without it. We need to keep it close. We need to lean not on our own understanding, but seek God's wisdom as a support and guide for our life. And not just as an occasional luxury, but daily sustenance. Wisdom offers a promise that the promise in chapter 3 is that wisdom prolongs life and brings prosperity. You will win favor and a good name in front of people and God, says Proverbs. And in a simple way, we can understand that wise choices extend our life in terms of healthy eating habits, good exercise, lead to longer living. That makes sense to us. But in the same way, the Bible says that wisdom promises to give us positive mental well-being and brings prosperous living, not in financial terms, but in terms of peace and satisfaction and clarity of good decisions made. We live life skillfully to bless others and to seek meaning and purpose. The term wasted life only means something if we have an understanding of what living a good life is. and putting it to good use, the opposite of wasting it. Perhaps the most well-known and loved verse from Proverbs is in this chapter. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths. So what are the ways that we acknowledge him that lead to wisdom? So trust in the Lord. Proverbs 3 gives us practical tips on gaining wisdom. It says, trust with your whole heart. Our divided hearts and our scattered thinking will lead to decisions that we can't rely on. And so we're invited as followers of God to trust him with our whole heart and seek his ways. How do we do that? It's a lifelong journey, but for starters, we acknowledge him in prayer, we praise, thanksgiving, serving, worship, directing our gaze towards him. It doesn't make us infallible, of course, but living like this will increase what I call wisdom saturation. So if you think about a sponge that's soaking in the bath, if you squeeze it, it'll produce water. And a person soaking in wisdom through prayer, through reading the Bible, through hanging out with other wise people, when they're squeezed, they'll produce wisdom. And it's through trust. This promise is through trust, not our sort of geeing ourselves up to produce wisdom, but it's a trust. Next, we're required to fear the Lord, which is a part of honoring God in the way that we shun evil. We need to run from it and not entertain it. And don't think that because the Lord loves you, that dabbling with immorality or foolishness will be okay. I mean, maybe some of you have read this story as well, but recently I read this horrendous news story of an 18-year-old who, on the first night of her arriving at university, was dead of a ketamine overdose. Her mother was staying in a hotel, and in the morning, instead of her daughter coming for the agreed shopping trip, she was met by 2 police officers. And what makes this story particularly devastating, I think, is that the girl never got a chance to learn from her choice. That was taken away from her. And it's a very stark example of the need to make wise choices from the beginning, not as a last resort. The fear of the Lord includes an understanding of the severity of going against his wisdom. And part of understanding that is our willingness to receive discipline from the Lord. Discipline is part of being discipled, same root. It's growing in healthy habits as we grow in wisdom, and we're being willing to learn from our poor choices. So discipline is not punishment. Punishment is other people imposing an unpleasant consequence on us, whereas discipline is support to make healthy choices with teaching about responsibility and natural consequences of our choices. God's rebuke may come through reading scripture, our conscience, through others, and through the consequences of our choices. And this discipline will form a barrier between us and the next poor choice. The next part of Proverbs 3, learning from wisdom. It says, "See and test how living God's ways brings blessings." So the writer of Proverbs is pretty sure about this as a way to live. Test it. See if it works. Wisdom can be enjoyed. Did you know that? It's good. to seek wisdom. It's a feeling of satisfaction and blessing. And it says, when can wisdom be enjoyed? And Proverbs says, well, when you go on your way and when you lie down. So in other words, all day long and all night long. Wisdom benefits us with peace, deeper peace, and a lack of fear, not stumbling, and confidence in the Lord. It's really important, and I haven't said this yet, but it's really important for us to note that wisdom is not a fail-safe guard from suffering. So wisdom will not keep us from experiencing all sorrow and pain. What Proverbs describes is that we have the power to limit our suffering because we can control our choices and some of our circumstances, not all of them, but some. So, for example, choosing to stay up late watching trashy TV before an exam, which we're then exhausted for, is self-imposed pain. There's people nodding as if they'd well know that. As opposed to when someone else hurts us, we're not in control of that. That's not whether we're wise or not. What is in our control, of course, is how we respond to people's dealings with us. But certainly Proverbs is talking about our self-imposed suffering, and wisdom can help us steer away from that. How is wisdom expressed? Wisdom is not only lofty thoughts and solving complex problems, but wisdom is described in Proverbs 3 as not withholding goodness, which I find really interesting. Not withholding goodness when it is within your power to act. Be kind now, don't put it off. I don't know about you, but I can get a good idea and then talk myself out of it. And regret is not wise living. While living in Lebanon, and this is a long time ago, over 12 years ago, I learned that it was the birthday of an Iraqi woman who was living close by. And their family had very little. And the thought came into my head of buying her some flowers. And I talked myself out of it, rationalizing that flowers were a bit pointless to someone with nothing. And that was, as I say, over 12 years ago, and I still remember it. And I suspect that if I'd acted on the wisdom of not withholding kindness, then instead of remembering what I didn't do, both she and I would be recalling something positive. Wisdom, because it has an effect on other people, wisdom can be esteemed by others. We value it in other people, don't we? We can think of the wise people in our lives and we appreciate them. And I think this aspect is quite extraordinary, that not only do we admire people who live wisely, but so does God, says Proverbs. The Lord takes the upright into his confidence. I mean, that's just wow to me. He blesses the home of the righteous, and he gives grace to the humble, and the wise inherit honor. That's the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 says, dedicate your whole life to wisdom. In early life, we need to pay attention to and gain understanding from our parents' instructions. It says, lay hold of wisdom and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. It's urgent. It's critical, says the writer of Proverbs. Do not forget, do not forsake. We need constant reminders. Verse 7 of chapter 4 says, wisdom is supreme. Though it cost you all you have, get wisdom. This verse spoke to me when I was considering going to Bible college many years ago to study cross-cultural mission. And as a result of it, I used my savings, and I was able to do so joyfully. I really got myself into a point where it was a joyful decision, because I was certain that there would be deep and long-lasting results, because God had promised that wisdom is supreme and it's worth fighting for. In our everyday life, says Proverbs 4, whether we're walking or running, choosing your path, it means that wisdom can filter through to anything we're doing, every and any aspect of life. How we rest, what friends we choose, what work we do, the people we serve. Wisdom is not simply for the big decisions of life. We constantly need it because we're making many, many choices every day. So think carefully about who are our companions, who are our guides, what are we reading, what are we watching, how do we spend our time, how much time do we spend with the source of wisdom. Wisdom is like walking in bright light, which is clear and unhampered. Proverbs 4 says that the wicked and unwise stumble and fall in the darkness. Seeking wisdom, which is the presence of God and his word and being with his people, will bring more and more clarity in our lives. Confusion and being tossed about by current trends can bring anxiety and self-doubt, and wisdom offers deeper rest and an assurance of living well. It's also mentioned that our entire life is to be dedicated to wisdom, to keep wise instruction in our hearts and guard it, to fix our gaze directly on the path of life, to not let wise words out of our sight. Listen closely. Keep corrupt and perverse talk away from your lips. It says wisdom brings health to your whole body. Make level paths, says Proverbs 4. We are contributors to some of the circumstances in our lives. Yes, stuff happens to us, but we can be responsible for trying to level the path or remove some of the boulders or the pebbles. We choose how to respond in relationship and trust to God about what life throws at us. And finally, the rewards of wisdom. If that wasn't convincing enough for a more peaceful life, a more clear life, a life in relationship to wisdom himself, Proverbs 4 ends with the rewards of wisdom, which I'd like to speak over us as a blessing, that this, for those wisdom seekers, which I hope will be all of us, this is what happens when we seek wisdom. Love her. She will watch over you. Esteem her. She will exalt you. Embrace her. She will honor you. A garland of grace on your head, a crown of splendor. I won't go too much into the interesting fact that wisdom is feminized in the Bible, but it is a beautiful blessing. And it is my hope and prayer that we will love wisdom, esteem wisdom, embrace wisdom, and that we will receive crowns as a result of making wise choices individually and together as a community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was great.